Good Monday to you. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I got a special treat for you now. There's a lot of news going on, especially in Gaza, where the Israelis stand accused of an errant strike on a hospital. The Prime Minister has apologized for what is reported to have caused the death of up to 20 innocents. I'll update that as more news comes along in the course of the day. President in the Oval with the South Korean president. And of course, we've got lots of political news from over the weekend. But I want to start with Alex Marlow. Alex, the author of this book, Breaking the Law. Alex is also the editor-in-chief of Breitbart. He is a longtime Breitbartian. In fact, he was Andrew Breitbart's first hire, which makes him a favorite of ours here at the Hugh Hewitt Show because Andrew was a friend and a friend indeed. Welcome, Alex Marlow. Great to have you here. Congratulations on Breaking the Law.
Hugh, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I know you gave it a very gracious and unexpected endorsement on X, the Everything app, which really meant a lot to me. Someone in your shoes with your credibility. I've been listening to you for over 20 years and glad to be colleagues with you on Salem now as well.
Well, I want people to know you have a great podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. And so go find Alex Marlow and just Google for the podcast. You'll be able to go straight to the Salem Podcast Network. But I want to focus on Breaking the Law. First of all, Alex, some background. You have two previous books, Breaking Biden and Breaking the News. You're a child of Los Angeles, Harvard, Westlake, Berkeley. Did you intend this sort of career when you were an undergrad?
I did, actually. Yeah, I went to Berkeley on purpose to kind of cause problems. I was a talk radio junkie growing up, and I was always sort of ambitious and interested in school and trying to be an intellectual one day. And I got hooked on talk radio. Our colleague Larry Elder was my first favorite, and Dennis Prager after that. And I thought that they were just opening my mind to so many things that I wasn't learning in high school. Though I liked my high school education, I learned a lot of important stuff at Harvard Westlake. It was really challenging and less woke than its reputation has become today. By the way, coincidentally, it's gone up in the rankings for national rankings as they've gotten more left. All of a sudden, you start doing better in the national polls. But I had always loved conservatism, conservative ideas, and thought that I was a libertarian at the time, but then I went to Berkeley and I thought this could be really fun because I got in and I thought I could be here, I could be an outspoken conservative and see what happens, and everything happened. It was an amazing journey while I was there, which I could spend hours on that, and I used that to meet Andrew Breitbart and to get involved in the conservative movement at a ground level where I knew nothing about the conservative movement. I was a bit player in it at the start, and I got to be a part of some of the biggest moments in recent history in conservatism by virtue of just showing up.
Yeah, the sooner you begin, the farther you go, and you are a testament to that. I am curious about whether or not you approached a book about the law, like Breaking the Law, with any trepidation that you would. I actually think it's very well written, very well researched. I've been teaching con law for 30 years, so that is my tip of the hat to a layman. Were you at all intimidated by that prospect?
Always. I've never done anything important that I wasn't intimidated by. I don't run arrogant. I run kind of humble. And I think a lot of my success has been born of fear. And I think the fact that I've seen other people climb bigger mountains than I have. So I feel like when there's a mountain in front of me, I feel like I can summit the mountain. But I always approach it as maybe this is the one where it doesn't work out. And I assembled a great team. I've been blessed to have a lot of great researchers who've helped me for all my books, all of them sort of in the Peter Schweitzer investigative research universe that I've been able to borrow from over the years. And I also have some real expert attorneys who are in my corner who've worked for me at Breitbart, and I got pretty decent access to President Trump and his attorney. So I thought with that combination, I could pull it off. But absolutely, of my three books, this was the most intimidating that I took on. And the reviews of it so far are the best of my three. So it seems like it's working out.
Well, Breaking the Law is very, very good. In fact, I will give you credit when I use it. From page 200, the best line in the book is that the United States faces a new existential threat, hundreds of presidents. Now, I have not seen that anywhere else, so I think it's original to Alex Marlow, is it?
I think so. I mean, I write my own book, and I'm very cautious about not plagiarizing. And if I ever pull an idea, I'm meticulous about citing it. As a student of our friend Dennis Prager, I have to. Or else I have to confess it, which I don't want to do. So I'm pretty cautious that if I wrote it, it's me.
Well, I think it's a fabulous way to telegraph problem of having district court judges issuing injunctions. I don't know if you caught Justice Gorsuch's concurrence last week in the lifting of his stay, where in one paragraph he expressed dismay with federal district court judges ignoring Supreme Court precedent that's squarely on the corners of issues before them. Did you see that, Alex?
I did catch it, and I was actually curious what someone like you, how you would react to it, because I thought we'd gotten past this. I thought they were pretty clear that district court judges preside over a district, and they don't get to have a veto over the executive branch and executive orders. And yet we're still here, where we're still seeing some of the same patterns play out. And I don't fully understand that as a non-lawyer. How is that possible? It just seems like we solved that, but then maybe we didn't.
Well, if I were teaching right now, I'm not teaching in the summer, and I probably won't be back until spring of 27 in the classroom, I would explain it as judicial frustration can only be expressed in a hortatory way, and then reversing the ruling. You can't punish, you can't sanction. Only the Congress can punish a judge with impeachment, and ignoring precedent isn't exactly an impeachable offense, at least not yet. But it does sum up the problem. The problem is judges don't feel bound by the rule of law, at least judges appointed by President Biden. If indeed they were appointed by President Biden, we don't really know who was nominating some of these late judges. And sure. I don't know that I want impeachment to be a holstered weapon that is brought out too quickly. What do you think on that, Alex Marlow?
Yeah, I'm very cautious about recommending any sort of radical things like that I think you've got to have the goods when you're doing these things. And this is something that I recommend consistently throughout the book, that we cannot break the law ourselves when we're opposing these people. And we have to reform the law, and we have to be patient in a lot of ways. And I cite a few examples of where we've been prudent and we've been patient with trying to bring about change. We've been successful. In particular with the Supreme Court, where it was a very radical court for decades, and we were able to slowly, methodically, through winning elections with great appointments, to make it a conservative court again. We do need to take that approach. I don't think we can build Rome in a day here, where we can just impeach all the bad judges and throw them out. Really, the solution is to just electing the best leaders who appoint the best judges. And when there's a judge race in your area, if you're voting for judges, that you have to actually pay attention to those and pick the best ones. That really is the solution. And unfortunately, you got to be patient to do that. But it is something that strikes me as illogical for sure, and probably illegal, that we now have to get essentially we have to avoid the veto of 600 odd judges for President Trump to have an executive order. That strikes me as completely outside of the bounds of the law, the way I've come to understand it. And it would be highly illogical if that's the policy, and yet that is what we've been witnessing the last 7 months.
It is completely outside of the law. And for the benefit of the audience, I will tell you, 2/3 of our district court judges have been appointed by President Biden or Obama, the rest by Presidents George W. Bush and President Trump. And that number will rise over President Trump's second term, but it's still, thank goodness for the Supreme Court. And I don't even mind liberal circuits, because that creates circuit splits, which create the opportunity for the Supreme Court to come in and settle law. Alex, one of the reasons I really like Breaking the Law. By the way, do you know what the Luntz Law is about promoting a book? The Luntz Law is you've got to say the title of the book 7 times in any segment. So you've got to say Breaking the Law. As I say in Breaking the Law, on page 30 of Breaking the Law. Because unless you do that, Frank put that in words that work, and I adopted that 20 years ago. And I think it's powerful, because the American attention span is such that you really have to drive it home. Breaking the law, breaking the law. But what I liked about it,
you just sold me a copy of Words That Work, so you're a good.
Well, hey, it is a great book. I think it's Frank's best book, and I've told him that. And some things stick, and that was one. Page 220, The Way Out. The reason I really like Breaking the Law is you and I agree on the way out. Vet, nominate, and confirm or elect good judges. It is that simple. It's patient. It's not quick. It won't satisfy our counter-revolutionary, but it's the only way, really.
Yeah, I love the counter-revolutionaries. I've worked for them at Breitbart. I work with them every day. I just don't see that as viable here. And I feel like that's a way to get ourselves in a lot of trouble, because I think that they will create a lot of trouble for us. We don't even need to do anything wrong for them to cause trouble for us. So we definitely can't try doing stuff that's wrong. So we have to abide by the law. and we have to change it through normal recourse. And I think we can do it with the power of persuasion and with the power of organizing, having the best, most persuasive ideas and candidates, and then making sure once they're in, they stay true to those principles. And when we're nominating people, I want to see a longevity in the conservative movement. I want to see a huge body of work that makes it so that we know they're going to dependably be conservative once they get to the bench. And we need to be very stalwart and steadfast in that regard.
I'm coming right back with Alex Marlow. During the break, you can run over to Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com and order Breaking the Law. You'll be a smarter person for having done so. We'll talk about some of the particulars when we come back. On this Monday, it's the last full week of summer, but Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com and host of the Alex Marlow podcast on the Salem Podcast Network, is with me to talk about his brand new book, Breaking the Law, which is available at Amazon.com, or Breaking the Laws at Barnes & Noble and bookstores everywhere. Alex, the left, I'm quoting you, page 23, the left has never regarded the rule of law as essential. And you write that after recounting the Biden pardons, which truly was, on a couple of levels, not only for who was pardoned, but how they were pardoned with the auto pen. And without a competent president, in my view, my opinion, I'm not a doctor, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn, but I think we are generally occur that at the end of his term he was not competent. And after promising not to pardon his son, he did so. But do you think the Republican Party is committed to the rule of law?
I do. I think overall they have been. I think one thing that's really interesting is you look at some of the history and you look at, for me, what was the biggest tell that the left was not interested in the rule of law was the way they've treated illegal immigration in my home state of California. Hugh, I know you're out here and you understand it, but we just accepted that you're allowed to break those laws and you're protected. You're actually better than citizens. You get free stuff. You don't have to pay in all the time. You get free school, free health care, and you even get the sanctuary protections, which is sort of better than they treat the taxpayers. It's certainly better than I get treated in this state. And once I realized that, I realized the law was just a tool of political power for the left. And then on the right, here's the exception that proves the rule. All the Abrego-Garcia conversation, which is that Trump, nearly violates a court order because the court order came down after Garcia had left the country. And we were obsessed with this for 3 weeks. Well, why were we obsessed with it for 3 weeks? Because there were no examples of Trump actually defying the court orders. If there was, we would have obsessed with one of those where he clear-cut broke the law. So, and I've spoke to President Trump.
He has never done that.
Yeah, he never has.
Now
and
today,
that's intentional. It's intentional.
But today he did sign an executive order purporting to penalize people who burn the federal flag, the United States Old Glory. Now, in 1989, by a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the right of an individual defendant in Texas to burn the flag. There is an argument that it's not dispositive of all flag burning at all times. Nevertheless, is that the sort of executive order you like to see the president issuing, or is that ignoring the rule of law? It was 5-4, it was 1989. There's a subsequent decision that embroiders a little bit, but generally I've been teaching con law forever, and I just tell people you can burn the flag, don't worry about it, it's asked and answered. What do you think about the president's EO?
Yeah, this is not what excites me as a free speech guy. I am as close to an absolutist, as close to a free speech absolutist, I think, as you can get realistically. So this is not what excites me about President Trump. But what does excite me about him is that he does make us question stuff that we've assumed to be true all the time. And I think that that's a very useful role he plays in public life in America right now. So if this does get appealed and it gets, if the executive order is written in such a way where it gets upheld, that's interesting to me. And if it gets thrown out, that's interesting to me as well. So I'm not too hung up on it either direction, but this isn't something that I'm waving a towel over my head in enthusiasm over it.
Well, that's how I felt about the executive order on children born of parents who entered the country illegally being citizens. It is time to answer that question. So he has teed it up.
Yes.
And he has teed it up in a way that an originalist court will be to answer. And I think they're going to answer, yes, they are citizens, but I do not object to his teeing up a question of first impression. I don't know that this is a question of first impression, so we'll watch it. Next question for you, page 29. The Soros Empire spent $40 million to elect its prosecutors, and another $77 million sent to 20 leftist NGOs to coordinate and control the prosecutors. I know that's factual. I follow that story closely. What do you think is the end that they are aiming for? To what end, Alex Marlow, is the Soros octopus doing this?
Yeah, this is the where the opinion kicks in. I offer the facts as much as I can. I have the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sources in citations. I try to go as mainstream as I can with the citations, so people who want to follow along, they can. But I feel like Soros is a chaos agent. I feel like he doesn't like this country. I don't think he likes what America stands for, and I do think that he's figured out a way to very easily erode the integrity of our cities, make it so that they are not cities on a hill, that they are places of chaos, of crime, of depression. I mean, I live adjacent to Los Angeles. I go down to LA. It's always very striking how the city is kind of a bummer. You're bummed out when you're there. The shopping is great, the food is great, but the people aren't very happy. I think he likes that stuff. I think that undermines America, and I think that's pretty much what his goal is. And a lot of left-wing people who have spent way too much time at university are very happy to go see him do it.
Let's spend some time on that. Last time I was in LA for a long period of time, I went up to Skid Row with Judge David Carter, which is the zombie apocalypse. There's 70,000 people living on the streets of LA, and people don't really know what it's like until you go there. And I went there with the federal judge, so I've got the federal marshals and all that kind of stuff. But it was staggering. I did the nightly news in LA for 10 years, and there was a Skid Row, but it wasn't anything like this. Why would anyone want the country to be that way? Why would George Soros hate the United States?
I don't know that one. That is a one where I would have to maybe I could do a Breaking Soros. Someone should do it. I mean, it seems like it's probably been written somewhere, but I don't know why he dislikes us so much. It seems like what he stands for is for every anti-American cause imaginable, every anti-Israel cause imaginable. He tends to put money into that as well. But what you note is very striking is that this should be a beautiful, iconic city. We all have a picture of LA in our mind. But you can go to the Ritz-Carlton or the JW Marriott in downtown LA and this gorgeous, opulent hotel, and right across the street, literally across the street, there'll be a homeless tent city. The La Brea Tar Pits, which is just an iconic, iconic history with an iconic history museum attached. All this rich history that's there, a place that I used to go peacefully as a child to learn about the history of this country, or prehistory, really. And then there's a tent city there now. And then we just accept it, is that that's okay. MacArthur Park, which is run over by illegal alien drug dealers in downtown LA. I got a beautiful park by my house. Do you know why it's beautiful? There's a little fence around it. And you can't get in unless you get a little key fob. And then, so it's a beautiful place. My kids can play there. You can't play in normal parks in LA. And we're okay with it. We're completely comfortable with it because our brain has been totally warped with this notion that Republicans are always bad.
Well, let me divert from breaking the law for just a moment. I'd like you to write Breaking Gavin. And not because I dislike him on a personal level. I think I actually have a grudging respect for his political chops in the blue bubble. He knows how to run in San Francisco and in California at large. Do you think he is at all acceptable to the United States as a whole? I imagine a Gavin Newsom, J.D. Vance race in 3 years. What do you think happens then?
Yeah, I never underestimate him politically. I've been in California most of my life, aside from about 8 years or so in the D.C. area. And so I followed Newsom's career the whole time, and he really is good. He knows how to message very effectively, and he knows how to talk to conservatives when he's talking to them. And I don't think he's as committed of a leftist as the way he governs, but his biggest weakness is his policy accomplishments are non-existent. Traffic has gotten worse. It's gotten more expensive. We had a surplus and it became a deficit in the state. Crime has gotten worse. Just the lifestyle feels like it's gotten worse. Half the city burned down in LA on his watch. So his record is terrible. We have the worst airport in the world. Los Angeles International Airport is ranked the worst in the world. So what is he known for on an accomplishment level? More men.
Oh, Alex, he's going to run on the train to nowhere. He's going to run on the bullet train, of course.
My favorite,
I'll be right back with Alex Marlowe. That's a joke. It's a joke, people. You're driving in LA, you just went off the road. That was a joke. I'm back with Alex Marlowe on the Hugh Hewitt Show. If you like Alex, and I can't believe you don't, remember he has a podcast with the Salem Podcast Network, The Alex Marlowe Show. Alex, I want to now get to the lawfare because you do a very extensive cataloging in terms that a layman can understand of what happened to Donald Trump from the time that he won the election, because it began not long thereafter with the appointment of Special Counsel Mueller, right through today. It continues today. Of all of these, I have my favorite for nominating as the worst example of lawfare. What is your nomination?
It's a great question because the biggest one is the appointment of Jack Smith, which was unconstitutional, and he was allowed to use the power of the DOJ and a job that didn't exist to harass Donald Trump in two different ways with two different cases. And it leaked constantly to the Washington Post. He was clearly a partisan guy, and the job wasn't even real, and it just took 18, 19 months for us to figure that out. So that's the highest consequence one. I would say, though, the worst examples are Letitia James in New York, who was so in your face about that she was going to hold Trump accountable, that for what? No one knew. She was just going to go get him. And then she invented a crime that did not exist. And then this was in a civil court, so it's not supposed to be a criminal court, but she treated it like a crime. And then he got assessed a cruel and unusual punishment, which I wrote in the book. This is a clear Eighth Amendment violation, and we learned last week that it was thrown out for exactly that reason. She's the worst offender in it. But I have to say, Hugh, and I know there's a long answer, but I have to say maybe my favorite was still the E. Jean Carroll case. Because
that's mine. All right, we agree again.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, tell me why, because I'll tell you why when you're done. It's absurd.
Every detail is absurd, and the more you read it, I have to say, if you have my sense of humor, reading the first few pages of the Eugene Carroll chapter in Breaking the Law, I was laughing writing it, and I shouldn't be, because all horrible, and it's horrible as it happened in our country. But I couldn't believe some of the details. They kept getting more ridiculous. How her case was exactly a Law and Order episode plot, and she was a Law and Order fan. How she had this dress, and she claimed she had this dress with Trump's DNA, and but she wouldn't turn it over. And the court didn't demand it. How there was this Anderson Cooper interview that she did where she said rape is sexy. And then the judge wouldn't allow for that to be played in court. And that she had written previously about sex in Bergdorf Goodman, which is where she claimed Trump had stalked her. And then this debate about whether or not she's Trump's type. She's clearly not Trump's type, which is relevant. But we're supposed to act like that's not relevant. Every detail was ridiculous. And then you learn it was the concoction of George Conway and with the funding of Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn billionaire who loves Joe Biden. That's how this happened. You can't believe this took place in America. And it was two cases.
Yeah, I think eventually all of this will be thrown out, like Jack Smith was thrown out, like Letitia James was thrown out. I believe the E. Jean Carroll verdict will be thrown out because it's truly a scar on the idea that we have a legal system here with some standards, because it was so absurd, but it's also my favorite. Now let's dive into some very good reporting on your part. Page 123, the Department of Injustice. I worked at Justice long ago and far away as a special assistant to William French Smith and then Ed Meese. So I know what the Deputy Attorney General does. I know what the Associate Attorney General does. I don't know Lisa Monaco or Vanita Gupta. How did you figure out the org chart, and how did you come to the conclusion that it was the DAG and the AAG who were running this thing?
It's a great question because it's a simple answer. Donald Trump himself, he said he was under the impression that these were the people who were actually calling the shots of the DOJ. And it works with me logically. I'm a pure Occam's razor guy, Hugh. So I always go with what's the most logical thing. And so how did Merrick Garland get atop the DOJ? Merrick Garland seems like a nice guy. He doesn't seem like a dumb guy. And he is not a radical. And he was up for that Supreme Court seat, which he would have gotten confirmed had Mitch McConnell allowed for a vote on it. And so you give him that as sort of a booby prize for not getting to be on the Supreme Court. He's completely out of his depth because he comes, even though a bright guy and a nice guy, he goes from having an office of 10 people to having an office of well over 100,000. He can't handle that. But he's got these people like Lisa Monaco and Vanita Gupta who are seasoned veterans of the DOJ and of the Biden apparatus in general, who are purely activists to the point where Vanita Gupta, who was the number 3 at the DOJ at the time, she even had to apologize to conservatives for some of the things she'd done in the past when she was up for the job. And these people have a lot of time on their hands. They're clearly committed partisans. And now they can operate with this layer of cover from Merrick Garland and Joe Biden as well. And then you see the lawfare starting to materialize against Trump, and all of it adds up logically. I present some of this to President Trump. I talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, I think you got it. I think it's Monaco. I think Monaco is the one who is really controlling it. And she worked very closely with Andrew Weissman, who is part of the Mueller probe and is the #1 lawfare enthusiast on cable news on MSNBC. I don't know if you've run into him over the years, Hugh, maybe you have.
No.
But
I've never met him, and I don't want to meet him because I think he's an embarrassment to every Department of Justice lawyer who ever worked there and tried to do so in furtherance of the idea of the rule of law. Alex Marlow has written a really super book on the 4 years of lawfare. against President Trump when he was out of power, and indeed the roots of that lawfare that were planted in the first term. Unfortunately, by Jeff Sessions' bad decision to recuse himself and Rod Rosenstein's decision to appoint Robert Mueller as a special counsel. But it's the next special counsel, Jack Smith, that I want to close our conversation with about Alex today. You point out he prosecuted Edwards and botched it, prosecuted Governor McDonnell and botched it, he prosecuted Rick Renzi. He has a long history of being a political prosecutor. If you really wanted to assure the public that you were not going to the bottom shelf, back expiration date there, you would not pick Jack Smith and bring him back from The Hague. Why do you think they did it? Do you think they knew he was a fanatic?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. And this is one of the key reveals, I think, that this was a political persecution. It was two persecutions. There were two Jack Smith cases, both of which I hope I have helped make sense of some of those to people who pick up the book. But you're correct to know that he was one of the guys who left the country when Trump won the first time. He's one of the people. There's so few of them. They talk a big game, but he actually left. He went to The Hague, and he's at the kangaroo court over there, riding his bicycle around. And he's got a wife who's an activist, a Democrat as well. And he gets picked at the exact moment the Democrats lose the midterms. And this is very relevant because the Democrats were in panic mode after they lost the midterm election, because that meant the J6 kangaroo prosecution was going to end. That whole committee was going to end, which was how they were controlling the news narrative against President Trump, because Republicans were going to come in, they were going to wind that down. So they made some very dramatic moves to try to amp up the lawfare in the ways they could help it. One of them was appointing Jack Smith, who immediately started leaking to the press stuff that was negative about Donald Trump. A couple other key things there. Nathan Wade in the Fani Willis case in Georgia was starting to make routine White House visits for 8 hours at a time. Wade was the family attorney who somehow got put on a RICO case and was now making White House visits. At the exact same time, Matthew Colangelo, who was at the time the number 3 at the DOJ, was getting sent to Alvin Bragg's office in Manhattan, which is a massive demotion to try to ramp up the Trump prosecution there. So clearly there is deep coordination, with Jack Smith being a major player in this, to try to get Trump after the Democrats were about to lose their J6 committee.
So, Alex, do you think the Democrats have learned? And this is a good place to kind of wrap up. The Democrats are meeting in Minneapolis as we speak. In fact, they might be listening to us on AM 1280 right now as they drive home from the convention center. They began with a land acknowledgement, and then their new chairman, Ken Martin, gave a cliche-ridden dictator-in-chief. He talked about all the standard talking points of the hard left. Do you think they will at least learn that lawfare is not a weapon you want to pick up lightly?
No, they never learn, and they won't learn here. They're going to ramp it up, and that's a great thing for me to prompt, because they're building their lawfare infrastructure. One of the things that I learned while researching the book is David Brock, who founded Media Matters, who I'm sure has written a lot of nice stuff over the years about you, Hugh, which they've written nothing nice about. Yeah, so what he's doing now is he's got this thing, the 65 Project, where he's trying to get attorneys who represent people like President Trump and the J6 prisoners and anyone like that, trying to get them disbarred. Not that they can't work at a nice white shoe law firm. They're trying to get them disbarred. So the lawfare apparatus is only growing. They take it very seriously, and they'll never stop until they have all the political power.
But about David Brock, I interviewed him long ago and far away when I was a weekend host for KFI. He came to my studio in Orange County. And he had that weird haircut then. Now it's the color of my hair. It's absolutely white, but it's just odd. I think he's lost cachet. Don't you think he's kind of viewed with a side eye, by people in the control room of the Democratic Party? He's just not very effective.
From your lips to God's ears, but I would tell you, John Eastman would beg to differ on that one, because he got John Eastman his law license suspended, and there are going to be a bunch of others who he's working on day and night to work on that. So, and he's a donor darling, continues to be. So the donors are going to keep emptying their pockets for the lawfare apparatus, and they're so well funded, they're so well capitalized. I introduced people to new billionaires who they probably have never heard of, who are funding elements of it in breaking the law, and it's just one of these things where never underestimate them. They look so weak and lame right now, Hugh. We all know it, and we love to see it, but I don't underestimate them until we have a much bigger margin than we have now.
If we had more time, I will go into one more point with you. We would go through Chapter 8, mapping the superstructure line by line, but I want to close this way. Mark Levin was my guest last week talking about his new book, On Power. In it, he writes that believers in negative power, meaning the left, will use positive power, meaning democracy, to advance their negative power. You write the left hates democracy. I don't think so. I think they like it to get power, but they don't like being found out by people like Alex Marlow. What do you think of that assessment?
I think they live by any means necessary credo, and they're trying to get power. And if they can tout democracy while rigging their own primaries, while trying to rig general elections by trying to make it so that the standard bearer of the other party is not on the ballot, I go through so many of the elections that they manipulated from the party level and not letting the voters, the people decide. I think it's pretty clear that they regard it at best as a tool to obtain power. I just think that when you think about the way the left operates, starting from the premise they don't like law and order, they would prefer chaos in our streets. We're seeing it in D.C. They're taking a pro-criminal line in D.C.
Yeah, they are
pro-criminal now. And it's one of these things, how could you be pro-criminal and then also pro-democracy? It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to their emerging demographic base either. Alex Marlow, let's finish with a plug for your podcast. How often do you do it, and what's it primarily about? It's on the Salem Podcast Network.
Thanks, you, and I'd love to return the favor over there. You've been so generous, particularly with that tweet. Really made me feel good, and it's nice to have such wonderful colleagues at Salem. I'm podcasting 5 days a week, and it's a new show. I try to keep it pretty tight for all of you, give you what's the latest I'm hearing from the Breitbart newsroom, and then some of the best guests in the world, I would say. And if I don't have a great guest, then you're not getting a guest, and I'll just run down the news with you. We have a great time making fun of the left, and I think giving you some compelling arguments about what's happening in the news.
In the great debate about how long the ideal podcast is, what is Alex Marlow's opinion? How long?
Oh, this is so fantastic because I love the 3-hour shows if people can sustain it, and sometimes nice to get a bite-sized, quick show. But I run around 45 minutes. I feel like that's a good.
That's exactly. Bingo. Yeah, 45 minutes to an hour if it's really entertaining. Alex Marlow, great to make your acquaintance by television and radio. I look forward to many more. The book is Breaking the Law. The podcast is The Alex Marlow Show. It's over at the Salem Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you go and get it. Alex, thank you. Follow him, by the way, at Alex. What's the X handle? Alex, is there an initial in there or is it Alex Marlow?
No, Alex Marlow. Easy. Thanks, you. You're the best.
Easy. Alex Marlow on X. Make it a follow. There is quite a bad story out of Israel. Israeli tankers hit the Nasser hospital twice today. Prime Minister Netanyahu has already apologized for that. I'll be joined by Dan Senor of the Call Me Back podcast to discuss that and many other issues related to the war in Gaza, which was also the subject of much conversation with President Trump in the Oval. And I'll be playing you a lot of the excerpts from the Oval Office long presser aside, the President of the Republic of South Korea. I want to tell you about Consumer Cellular, one of our great sponsors. Consumer Cellular makes a habit of targeting people who are 50 years and older. Now, they'll sell their wonderful phone system to anyone, and you don't have to sacrifice service for savings. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh is where you go, ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Use my code, Hugh25. You'll get $5 off each of your first 5 monthly invoices in addition to a great new deal. And if you call 1-800-411-4454, use the code as well, Hugh25. 1-800-411-4454, Hugh25. Or go to ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Why do they aim at 50 years old and older? Because almost always people who are over 50 are paying way too much because they're buying too much data. They don't need unlimited data. Unlimited data is for gamers and kids who are living on the internet and living on the wireless that they need, and they're using it in Starbucks and wherever they are. That's not you if you're 50 years and older. But if you want unlimited data as opposed to a 5 gig plan or a 10 gig plan, if that's you, if you're over 50, you can get 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month. And you can keep your phone number, you can keep all your contacts, keep all of everything you want. You can get a new device or keep your old device. First thing you've got to do, though, is call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. The quality of the service is the equal of any cellular company out there. Don't get stuck forever not looking at your phone bill. Before you call them, find that phone bill. Find that cellular bill. Get it in front of you. Even if you have to print it off, get it. and then call consumercellular.com/Hugh, 800-411-4454. Relief Factor here in my hand. Got my 10K in on Sunday. Beautiful day. Did better than when I ran with the Flash, so I'm going to tell him I beat his time already. But here it is, 4 pills. Take it every day. I'll tell you why. Taking it for more than 10 years. The reason is very simple. It works. No minor aches and pains. No bad back, no bad elbow. Even when I do a 10K and I'm trying to do more than trundle, just run a little bit as well as trundling, no lasting effects. I got to tell you, you should try it if you have anything that nags you that you take an over-the-counter medicine for, whether it's a bad back, a bad shoulder, whether your ankle hurts, your knee hurts, whatever it is, give it a shot. 3-week starter pack, $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Less than $1 a day. Or call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or their website, relieffactor.com. Get the 3-week starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day. And quite a lot going on in the Oval Office today. President Trump did not one, but 2 press availabilities, one in the morning, one in the afternoon with President of South Korea. I'm going to go to that in just a moment, but first let's do a market update brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. If you're going to buy gold, or you're going to sell gold, do it with AmericanFederal.com. Nick Grovich and his team, best in the business, transparent, honest. They tell you up front, depending on how much you buy, your commission will be affected by that. The more you buy, the lower the commission. They go up to 7-figure sales, and they'll sell you a quarter ounce of gold. They also do silver and platinum and everything else. And for the handful of you out there who are coin collectors, American Federal deals with you as well. Their phone number is 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. AmericanFederal.com. In the business for 44 years. Today, gold is at $3,411 an ounce. $3,411 an ounce. That is down $7.30 from where it was yesterday. Gold trades 24/7, 365. It's not like our stock market, but it was down a little bit today, but it's still over that 3,400 mark, which I honestly did not believe I would see for a couple of years, and it is. I'm not running off to buy gold. I buy gold every January, regardless of the price. It's called dollar cost averaging, so that you put the same amount of money into the same stock or the same commodity at the same time every year, and it minimizes the risk that you're buying on a high or buying on a low. You can't chase the market. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you want to start buying gold and adding gold to your diversification, which is a good idea from everyone to everyone, diversification is the first thing they'll tell you. Precious metals is part of that. Call Nick Grovich and his team at 1-800-411-4454. Down day on Wall Street. The Dow is down 0.77%. The S&P 500 down 0.43. The tech-heavy NASDAQ down 0.22. But gold at 3,411. Now let's go to President Trump in the Oval, cut number 2.
As I said, we've had 0 murders in the last week. And some of these people were from foreign countries. They said, that doesn't sound so good. And I said, well, it doesn't sound good, but Washington was the most dangerous place in this country. And now, you know what? It's probably the safest place in our country. Everyone's starting to come here. The restaurants now you can't get in. Many of them closed because they couldn't open with crime. Everybody before me is happy what I'm doing. Most of you won't say that because you're radical left. The newspapers are so dishonest. The press is totally dishonest, but that's all right. We've gotten used to it, and we won in a landslide. So
we have gotten used to it. I'm talking with Christopher Scalia tomorrow, who's written this fabulous book called 13 Novels Conservatives Will Love and Probably Haven't Read. One of them is Evelyn Waugh's Scoop, and it's about the fact that journalism has been corrupt forever, and the Brits are aware of it, and they laugh at it. Americans used to not be aware of it. Trump's kind of made them aware that journalism about creating a narrative and selling newspapers, and the narrative, they don't like the narrative that Trump is good for D.C., so they write the opposite, and he's right about that. Cut number 3 about President Trump and the allegation that he's a dictator.
a lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, They're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick. But I'm really saying, and I say this to all of you, in a certain way, we should wait to be asked, because they have cities that are so under control, out of control. So we go in and fix it. They take the full credit for it, and they go out and say, I heard it this morning. They're saying how well they've done over the last 10-day period, that they set record lows. They don't say that we're there with very tough people, by the way. They have to pass the toughness test. Otherwise, they're not working for us. So, and we're allowed to do that now, according to the United States Supreme Court decision. Now, they have to pass a toughness test. If they're not tough, we don't want them for this job. They might be great for other jobs, but not for this job.
Then he had an aside about President Biden, cut number 4.
This was the most incompetent administration in history, the Biden administration. And you're just lucky that they lost, because if they won, you wouldn't have a country anymore.
And then he added a comment about Vladimir Putin, cut number 5.
Every conversation I have with him is a good conversation. And then, unfortunately, a bomb is loaded up into Kiev or someplace, and then I get very angry about it. I think we're going to get the war done. It's tough. I thought that would be, of the 7 that I settled, I thought that would be the easiest of the group. See, you never know what's going to happen. In a war, strange things happen in war.
And then he went on to talk about Brandon Johnson in Chicago, cut number 6, cut number 6.
This is a meeting and a group of people that are doing an unbelievable job in a thing called crime, and in particular, violent crime. Today we're going to be discussing it. And I watched as a very incompetent mayor from Chicago said, well, what do they know? They only arrested 9 people. I said, 9 people? We didn't arrest 9 people. We actually arrested a total of well over 1,000 people. We took hundreds of guns away from young kids that were throwing them around like it was candy. We apprehended scores of illegal aliens. We seized dozens of illegal firearms. There have been 0 murders. It sounds sort of terrible to say. It's embarrassing. I did this over the weekend. I'm making a speech, and I acted like I was so proud. As I said, we've had 0 murders in the last week. And some of these people were from foreign countries. They said, that doesn't sound so good. And I said, well, it doesn't sound good, but Washington was the most dangerous place in this country. And now, you know what? It's probably the safest place in our country. Everyone's starting to come here. The restaurants now you can't get in. Many of them closed because they couldn't open with crime. Everybody before me is happy what I'm doing. Most of you won't say that because you're radical left. The newspapers are so dishonest. The press is...
Then he continued to talk about Chicago, cut number 9.
As you all know, Chicago's a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him. Freedom, freedom. He's a dictator. He's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick. But I'm really saying, and I say this to all of you, in a certain way, we should wait to be asked, because they have cities that are so under control, out of control. So we go in and fix it. They take the full credit for it, and they go out and say, I heard it this morning. They're saying how well they've done over the last 10-day period, that they set record lows. They don't say that we're there with very tough people, by the way. They have to pass the toughness test.
All right, we heard that part before. Let's go to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is, of course, the illegal immigrant who has been to El Salvador and back, was in Tennessee jail and was released on Friday, cut number 11.
Today, MS-13 gangbanger and human trafficker Kilmar Abrego Garcia turned himself into ICE in Baltimore. Do you have any comment on this, and why are the Democrats so emotionally attached to this man who beats his wife and is part of a terrorist organization?
Because they think he's going to be good for votes, and I think he's very bad for votes. These people are deranged. He's not good for votes. He beat the hell out of his wife. His wife is afraid to even talk about him. She's been mauled by this animal. And, through a system of liberal courts, he's doing things. But, no, we have that under control. And Pam has got that very much under control. Do you want to comment on it, Pam?
No, got him under control. He will no longer terrorize our country. He's currently charged with human smuggling, including children. The guy needs to be in prison. He doesn't need to be on the streets like all these liberals want him to be. And as part of this operation here in DC, we've also taken off MS-13 members. We've taken, I think just last night, we got a TDA guy off our streets right here, right around from where we all work. Another TDA member gone because of this project. So we're going to keep America safe from all of these foreign terrorist organizations, including Abrego Garcia.
You know, I really do not know why Democrats are making this an issue. J.D. Vance was on Meet the Press yesterday, and he said this. I'll save that for the next segment or after Dan Senor. We can, however, add Donald Trump talking with South Korea President Lee Jae-myung this afternoon, cut number 27.
Currently, there is a fact-finding investigation by a special prosecutor that was appointed by the National Assembly. And this special prosecutor...
Is his name deranged Jack Smith by any chance? they took him from our country. They put deranged Jack. He's a deranged, sick individual.
Really sure the South Korean president is going to get the reference to Jack Smith, but we will find out. Coming up after the break, I'm expecting Dan Senor. He is the host of the Call Me Back podcast. He had a fascinating conversation today with center-right journalist Amit Segal, who works for, I believe, Channel 13 in Israel, about Israel's reputation in the world, made more difficult, no doubt, today by the strike on the Nasser hospital in Gaza. Since the massacre of 10/7, when Hamas invaded Israel, slaughtered 1,200, wounded 5,000, and kidnapped 250 people, one podcast has emerged as indispensable. That is Dan Senor's Call Me Back podcast. Now, Dan has expanded the offerings at ARC Media, and he's also made it available to become a Call Me Back Insider, which I've done. I've now subscribed to Call Me Back Insider because I like Nadav Eyal and Amit Segal and all these people. Dan Senor joins me now. Good afternoon, Dan. Congratulations on the expansion.
Hey, Hugh. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm glad, especially on a day with bad news coming out of Israel, because you talked with Amit Segal today about the fact that Israel appears to be losing the war, the media narrative war, at least in the international left. What would you recommend that the Prime Minister do after the hit on the Nasser hospital today?
Well, I think it's important that he basically issued a statement taking responsibility and saying that the IDF issued a statement saying that they were doing a full investigation. Assuming what we know about it so far is what actually happened, it was clearly an accident. No one was targeting journalists. Nobody was targeting medical workers. The reality is, Hugh, as you know and as you've covered extensively since October 7th, Gaza is the most population-dense territory in the world, certainly the most population-dense battlefield that we know of, war theater that we've known of in modern history. And Israel's fighting an enemy that, as its strategy, co-locates its fighting forces in civilian areas, in medical facilities, in hospitals, in mosques, in schools, in UN facilities, and it uses its civilian population to protect the terrorists and the war fighters rather than the other way around. And so, tragically, an accident like today, if that was in fact the case, can happen. It's a rarity. It's extraordinary, by the way, that these sorts of things are the rarities that they are. It speaks to the great lengths the IDF goes to avoid these kinds of mistakes. I think they not only are held to a higher standard than almost any other military in the world, but they hold themselves to a higher standard than any other military in the world. And yet, even with the great lengths that the IDF goes to, by the way, a great risk to their own lives, these sorts of things happen. And I think the Prime Minister simply has to explain that. And I think he has started to. And I think his friends and allies around the world, including in Washington, like the Trump administration, should back him up in making it clear that this is a tragic war that could end tomorrow if Hamas chooses to end it. And until then, the ugliness of war and the errors in war will continue to occur.
Now, Dan, I always point out when something like this happens, the United States bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade during the NATO operation against Yugoslavia in 1999. Bad things happen in war because things go amiss. However, This is only the second that I can think about. There was the aid worker convoy that was a mistake for which Israel paid a heavy price in the international media. Can you think of any other major strike that was in error?
No, not of this scale. There have been many, incidents of human catastrophe that Israel has been held responsible for, even though it wasn't responsible for, has been blamed for.
Oh, they shot their own hostages.
Right,
Yeah.
and the hospital, in the Shifa hospital, I think it was, in the early part of the war, like a month, and this was still in 2023, when the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, misfired a rocket that ended up landing on the area adjacent to the hospital, and immediately everyone, including the New York Times, blamed Israel for it. So there have been these incidents that Israel has been blamed, or at least initially been blamed. But I don't, other than the ones that Israel were ultimately responsible for, which it sounds like it was in this case, we can count them on one hand. Again, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, just think about this. This October will be 2 years, and Israel's fighting on multiple fronts, and its military is overstretched, and it is, as I said, it's fighting against the most diabolical enemy one could possibly imagine, and it's a miracle that I'm not letting anyone off the hook. I'm not absolving anyone of responsibility here. I'm simply saying it is a miracle that more incidents like this have not happened. There was a camera, from what I understand, according to reports, pointing at an Israeli tank, and they were concerned that the camera was being used to track the movements of the IDF for purposes of obviously targeting it. That's not a crazy assumption. I'm sure we'll learn more about that. And that's partly what resulted in them firing at this facility.
Now, what I want to talk about was Amit Segal today made the argument that is close to my heart, which is I don't think Israel should believe that the world is turning against it. I just saw the polling in America where the numbers are still 3 out of 4 people support Israel strongly. I believe the international left has just thrown off the cloak that they try to hide between being even-handed. And every time an Israeli politician says that, or an Israeli activist, I think it's an admission against interest. And Amit made that point, that the Israeli opposition make these statements. They appear not to know how they are amplified by the international left. Do you think they're ever going to figure that out?
It's really crazy. I mean, I try to make the case for Israel and the importance of this alliance that the United States has with Israel. Often on American television, when I do, I'm often quoted by anchors who are critical of Israel, who cite Israelis, who who articulate the same criticisms that I'm being presented with to respond to. And look, my response to you, Hugh, is on the one hand, it's maddening when Yair Golan, who's a former deputy chief of staff of the IDF, who's currently the leader of the Democrats Party in Israel, which is the far left party in Israel. He's been on my podcast, smart guy, but he said about a month or two ago that Israel, the IDF, is killing children, making a habit or a hobby or something of killing children. Now, if he's in a future government, which is entirely possible, he could be serving in a government that's a successor to the Netanyahu-led government. He doesn't think the ICC or these other international bodies are not going to use his own words against him and say, so you said, it's not just the prime minister, it's not just Defense Minister Gallant at the ICC, but they'll say, you said Israeli soldiers were making a hobby or a habit, forget the exact word, of killing Palestinian babies. So, how do you have an official in the Israeli government saying that? Now, I understand he's in opposition and political figures in opposition say incendiary things for a domestic audience, but they do not take great care to think about how this will be interpreted internationally. And this is the tension of Israel. On the one hand, they want to be a normal country. In my Inside Call Me Back, you mentioned the subscriber service for Inside Call Me Back, the insider feed. Nadav Ayel, in a recent episode of that conversation we had, he said, Israel wants to be treated like a normal country, and normal countries have thriving, noisy, contentious democracies. And opposition figures in noisy, contentious democracies say incendiary things against the government. That's what they do. One could argue that's their job. So on the one hand, Israel wants to be a normal democracy. On the other hand, tragically, Israel is held to this ridiculous standard internationally. So it's like it's a lose-lose situation. You can't.
It's
tell
maddening.
the
Now, Dan,
opposition
I
figure-
told you one segment, but if you can stay two, I
Sure.
want to continue
Sure.
the conversation about a meet. We're going to take a 4-minute break, and I'll be back. If Dan can stay, I will. But go to Call Me Back podcast, and I strongly recommend you become a subscriber to the Insider Call Me Back feature, because the conversations on Dadav and Amit, they're just invaluable for people in America. Dan Senor is the creator and host of the indispensable podcast. If you're interested in Israel, it's Call Me Back. There's also a Call Me Back Insider feature now, which I have subscribed to. I can't recommend highly enough. Dan, 2 things in 6 minutes. First, the president's Oval Office comments today that he thinks Gaza will be over in 2 weeks. I was mystified by that. And then Amit Segal, your guest today, saying Israel understands it gets hammered in the international press, but in the end, it always comes back, and we're in higher esteem when we win. You pick your order you want to cover those 2 things, aware that we got 5 minutes or so.
I'll be trying to be succinct. On the second point, as you know from that episode, I tried to challenge Amit a little bit on what feels to me like the walls are closing in internationally against Israel right now. So I think they have to be a little more strategic and proactive in their communications internationally. That said, I've said since October 7th that if you look at the diplomacy that was happening around Israel, the normalizing of relations of Israel in the Arab world, specifically in the Sunni Gulf, before October 7th, this normalization was not happening because Israel was perceived as weak and vulnerable. It was happening because Israel was viewed as a military and intelligence juggernaut, and an economic superpower in the region, and a technology superpower in the world. Strength, one word, strength. Israel was perceived as a source of strength, and the Arab world, most of the Arab world, wanted to piggyback onto that strength for their own interests. And if Israel comes out of this war, however messy and long it is, looking like it persevered against a multi-front war, and it's still standing, and Hamas can't crawl out of the rubble after October 7th and say they're still here, Israel, according to this point of view, Israel will regain its geopolitical position in the world. I think it already has, based on its success with the pager attack against Hezbollah, against the extraordinary joint Israeli-U.S. operation against Iran. So I do think that time will pass, and there'll be plenty of time for Israel to do repair. And if diplomatic repair, and if it looks like it's in a strong position, countries around the world will still want to do business and partner with Israel. As it relates to President Trump, I think what President Trump is seeing and hearing is the intelligence on what Israel plans to do in Gaza City. It is the last stronghold for Hamas. I spoke to an American official in Israel the other day, whose name I won't say, who said, if Israel does not go into Gaza City, Hamas will be able to regain its position, and Israel has to learn to live with the reality that there'll be a future, some form of a future October 7th. And so I think that's what the president is referring to, is that Israel seems pretty, or at least the prime minister and the leadership feels pretty focused on going into Gaza City with all its risks, and there are plenty, more than we have time to get into today, but that if they actually do not go into Gaza City, Hamas could conceivably live to fight another day. And I think the president is saying, because Israel's going in, the likelihood of Hamas living to fight another day goes way down.
I hope that's what he meant. Very last comment. I continually write, Dan, the world has 4 superpowers now: America and China, Russia, and Israel. That means a nuclear power capable of projecting forth with the will and the intelligence capacity to do so strategically with tactical success. Do you agree with my assessment? When it comes down to it, there are really only 4.
Yeah, and I would say that the U.S. Israel gives the U.S. extraordinary leverage in the Middle East, in one of the most strategically important parts of the world for the United States. As Ron Dermer quoted Al Haig on my podcast, Al Haig said several decades ago that Israel is like a battleship, an aircraft carrier in the heart of a region that means a lot to the United States. Haig said an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the heart of a region that matters a lot to the United States. And I think that unsinkability gives it its superpower status, its force projection in the region gives it its superpower status, and it's an extraordinary asset to the United States, the most important superpower in the world, for that region. It gives the U.S. leverage in the Middle East. It means that the U.S. has to do less, not more, in the Middle East because Israel is there.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why, again, recommend to everyone who's listening or watching on the Salem News Channel, go and listen to Call Me Back. You can get, for free, a lot of good Call Me Back, but you ought to become an insider at Call Me Back and get it all. Dan Senior, always good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me, my friend. Don't go anywhere, America.
Hugh, great being with you. Thank you.
More of President Trump's conversation in the Oval Office this afternoon with the president of South Korea. It went all over the place. I mean, literally all over the place. But I can only say the contrast with President Biden grows more and more intense every day that Donald Trump engages visibly and energetically with the American news media, takes all questions, jokes, laughs, and delivers not just punchlines, but punches against the evildoers, as George W. Bush used to call them, who are set upon the destruction of our country or the murder of our citizens in their cities. We have a great sponsor, Americans for a Balanced Budget, and they are running a website right now, StopHealthCostHikes.com. You will be interested in it if you are a consumer of health insurance via the Obamacare state exchanges, because when Obamacare wrecked American health care and made it more expensive for everyone, and you couldn't keep your doctor if you wanted to, and you couldn't keep your plan if you wanted to, millions of Americans were obliged to go into the Obamacare state-operated health exchanges. To make it a little bit easier, because the sticker shock was so high, the Congress gave tax credits to people who had to do it that way. They were screwed. Some unions pulled back their plans. Other employers decided they can't afford it. Still other people changed jobs and found that the new employer wasn't offering health insurance. They had to do it. You have to be covered in the United States. You really can't risk it. So the state exchanges came along, and they were expensive. And, you know, there are the platinum, the silver, and the bronze plans or something like that. They're all bad, and they're all too expensive. But Congress passed health care cost credits for people who had to buy their insurance from Obamacare state insurance exchanges. In the one big beautiful bill, which was a huge win for Americans generally, the 37 million Americans who used those tax credits did not get them extended. So please help prevent a devastating health care tax hike. Your voice does count. So visit StopHealthCostHikes.com and tell Congress, protect those tax credits, stop rising costs, and act before it's too late. Visit StopHealthCostHikes.com. Now, President Trump, as I said, was in the Oval with the South Korean president talking about stability on the Korean Peninsula, and he had this to say about what the South Korean president told him about stability on the Korean Peninsula. It was pretty interesting. Cut number 30.
Mr. President, you mentioned about Chairman Kim, and thanks to your efforts when you were in office during your first term, the situation on the Korean Peninsula was stable. But during the hiatus where you were out of office, North Korea developed further its nuclear and missile capabilities, and that led to a deterioration on the situation of the Korean Peninsula.
And they wouldn't have done that. They would not have done that if I were president. That was not going to happen.
대통령이 당선되었다면은 그런 일이 일어나지 않았을 것입니다.
전적으로 공감합니다.
I completely agree with you.
Now, I completely agree with you. That's kind of nice. When the president of South Korea says, yeah, it was good under you, then it was bad under Biden, it's good again, that's kind of nice for the president. J.D. Vance on Meet the Press yesterday, addressing squarely the redistricting process underway in Texas and across the United States. Cut number 21.
You have to ask yourself, why have Democrats gerrymandered their states aggressively over the past 10 to 20 years? If you look, for example, at the popular vote in a lot of these states, and Massachusetts, where 32% of the residents of Massachusetts voted for Republicans, 0 Republican federal representatives. So we're not trying to all we're doing, frankly, is trying to make the situation a little bit more fair on a national scale. The Democrats have gerrymandered their states really aggressively. We think there are opportunities to push back against that, and that's really all we're doing.
Yeah, I love it. This is straightforward. By the way, J.D. used the correct number. The vice president said 32%. There's always a temptation among Republicans. Well, we've got 40% or 35%. No, it's 32% voted for Donald Trump in Massachusetts. One of the most liberal, if not the most liberal, state in the union. Vermont's up there, but it's hardly a state. Gets 2 senators. Rhode Island gets 2 senators too. It's hardly a state, but they get 2 senators. But the most liberal major state is Massachusetts. Remember, Richard Nixon won. He even took South Dakota against George Montgomery. He lost the District of Columbia and Massachusetts. But there are still a third, or just a bit under a third, 32%, and the vice president used the correct number. I greatly appreciate the vice president doing his homework before he goes on any of the Sunday shows, though I do not understand why we are giving them the time of day. Kristen's my friend, but the friend of the Republican Party is nowhere to be found on any of the legacy networks. None, zero. J.D. Vance was also in the Oval Office gaggle today, cut number 26.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks, Mr. President. Thanks to the incredible team here. You know, I want to echo something the president said, where you say there haven't been murders in a couple of weeks in D.C., and it doesn't sound good, but then you talk to local law enforcement, and I didn't realize that this town averaged 1 murder every other day for the last 20, 30 years, which means that in 2 short weeks, the president and the team have saved 6 or 7 lives, people who would have been killed on the streets of D.C., who are now living, breathing, spending time with their families, because the president had the willpower to say no more. We're not going to give the streets of D.C. over to vagrants and robbers and murderers. And the last point I want to make, sir, to your point about we want people to welcome us, to ask us, because look at Governor Pritzker in Illinois, or Governor Newsom in Los Angeles, or Governor Moore in Maryland. They are angrier about the fact that the President of the United States is offering to help them get their crime under control than they are about the fact that murderers are running roughshod over their cities and have been for decades. Why are Democrat governors angrier about federal law enforcement helping clean up their streets than they are about the fact that those streets need to be cleaned up to begin with? It shows a real sickness in the head. And I agree with the President of the United States. I think most Democrats, rank and file, nobody likes crime. Republicans don't like crime. Democrats don't like crime. Independents don't like crime. Why are Democrats...
I'm not sure Democrats don't like crime, Mr. Vice President. I'm not sure. They sure don't talk like they don't like crime. I almost got targeted, that's you, Mrs. Hewitt and I, last week. I tell you, thank you, webroot.com/Hewitt, for protecting millions of Americans from being phished. I am very good at spotting phishing. Very good. I'm a suspicious lawyer. And so, although someone broke into some data trove and they know someone who has a HELOC on my home, and they said, we represent this bank, why don't you give us a call, something's wrong with your loan. I just looked at the address and I thought, I'm getting phished, P-H-I-S-H-E-D, for those of you from Pittsburgh. That means someone is pretending to be something that they aren't, and if you hit on the link, you let malware into your whole computer. Don't get hooked, all right? You need webroot.com, webroot.com/Hewitt, and they will offer you 2 sets of services. You can pick either Webroot Total Protection or Webroot Essentials. Depending on what you pick, you'll get a suite of services that will protect you: a firewall, a network monitor, a password manager, a system optimizer, up to $1 million in protection for stolen funds. Get 50% off Webroot Total Protection or Webroot Essentials today. Just go to webroot.com/Hewitt. That's webroot.com/Hewitt, and then browse safely. The Democratic National Committee is meeting in Minneapolis as we speak. They're probably going home right now. I want the whole country to hear how the DNC opened today. Cut number 33.
Is Lindy Somek, who is from the Saginaw Ojibwe Nation, and she's going to deliver our land acknowledgement today. Lindy.
Bonjour, Lindy Somek, Nindichinikas, Amik Saginaw Chippewa Dojaba, Anishinaabe Kwe and Dow. Good morning, DNC members, friends, and relatives. Let's talk about the land for a second. The DNC acknowledges and honors the Dakota Oyate, the Dakota people, who are the original stewards of the lands and waters of Minneapolis. The Dakota cared for the lands, lakes, and the Wapatonka, the Great River, the Mississippi River, for thousands of years before colonization. This land was not claimed or traded. It's a part of a history of broken treaties and promises. And in many ways, we still live in a system built to suppress Indigenous peoples' cultural and spiritual history. as Democrats.
I just think it's great that they're doing land acknowledgments. The rest of the country is saying, colonialism? Really? The great engine of prosperity and progress that is Western-style capitalism that was born here in the Industrial Revolution. There is no secret involved that the Native Americans were screwed repeatedly by treaties that were broken hundreds of years ago and decades ago. They got Justice Gorsuch up there now protecting their rights under their treaties. But the DNC hasn't changed. More on that coming up. Got to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. ReliefFactor.com. That's their website. Find the starter pack, $19.95. Or go and call 1-800-4 and the word relief. A statistically significant number of my grandchildren went back to school today, and their parents are happy. And their parents are going to, I'm just short, not have as many aches and pains as they normally do, because you don't have to chase as many kids. They still got the smalls running around, the toddlers. That's still exhausting. But if you're a parent celebrating today that the kids have gone back to school, wherever you are, celebrate for yourself, not with a glass of Chardonnay, not with a beer. Get yourself some Relief Factor. 1-800-4 and the word relief. You don't have to live with the shoulder pain. You don't have to live with the shin splints. You don't have to live with the after effects of being a workout gym rat or swimming 1,000 yards or whatever it is that you do. I got my 10K in on Saturday. Feel great because Relief Factor works. The only supplement that I've taken in more than 20 years. I've been taking it for longer than 10 years. I take one a day. When you get the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day, you take 3 packs on the first day for the first week, 2 packs for the second week a day, and then 1 pack a day thereafter. You'll feel great. You will thank me. You will thank Relief Factor. So right now, before you do anything else during the break, call 1-800-4 and the word relief, or visit their website, ReliefFactor.com, and click on that starter pack. Speaking about back to school day, Bethany Mandel is coming up in the next hour after I do a little riff on the DNC, because I had to listen to the whole speech by the DNC chair. Oh, that was painful. Stay tuned. I'll tell you about it in hour 3. Whether you are recovering in the Outer Banks from the brush of Hurricane Aaron, or up in the San Francisco Bay Area, down in San Diego, or somewhere in southern Florida, welcome. Corner to corner, coast to coast, the Hugh Hewitt Show is for you and has been for 25 years. Thank you for listening. During the break, I was catching up on my subtext. I have The Universe, which is a subscription service, and I talk with people who subscribe to it, and they text me and I text them. And this is apropos of nothing, just the last one I read. You keep saying not to spend this is from Marty in the Bay Area, by the way, 925 area code. You keep saying not to spend the proceeds of a reverse mortgage. No, I don't. Listen to what I say. Whenever I tell you about andrewandtodd.com and the fact that they do reverse mortgages, I say you don't have to spend the reverse mortgage. You can just live off the interest if you want a little extra income in your budget and take the 4% that you're earning because long-range interest rate. If you don't want to touch your equity, just get it out of the house and put it to work for you in treasury bills or something muni, double tax-free municipals or something like that. But they heard me wrong. People often do. You keep saying not to spend the proceeds of a reverse mortgage. I beg to differ. I'm 76 and have a very comfortable retirement income, but not enough to do all the traveling I want to do while I'm healthy enough. I think my travel window of opportunity is about 10 years. And that is what I'm going to use my Andrew and Todd reverse loan proceeds for. Getting the reverse was very liberating. Yes, it is. And AndrewandTodd.com do it better than anybody else. 888-888-1172. Wonderful sponsors of the Hugh Hewitt Show. And if you are a senior citizen, 62 years or older, and you are living in your primary residence, you too can get a reverse mortgage. You never have to make another mortgage payment. They just take the right amount of money out of your house and they hand it to you. You still have to pay your property taxes. You still have to pay your homeowners association, but you don't have to make another mortgage payment. It requires 2 calls, a lot of counseling. It's a process. But at the end of it, you can be like Marty and go traveling. Now, I'm a little more conservative than Marty, but I'm not telling you what to do with your money. It's your money. You earned it, Marty. I want to make that clear. If you want to talk to Andrew and Todd about a reverse mortgage, 888-888-1172. Now, the DNC. The Democratic National Committee is listening right now because they're driving home in Minneapolis, and I'm on AM 1280, The Patriot, and have been for 25 years. And I am so glad you're in Minneapolis. I hope you have a wonderful time. Hope you stick around long. Is the State Fair on? I hope you get to go to the State Fair and get the giant buckets of French fries and chocolate chip cookies and go to see the Butter Queen. And if you are from Minnesota cold, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the DNC was doing DNC things today. Eric Erickson posted, at the DNC, delegates are being told the trans movement is succeeding and that being strong on safety is a better message than tough on crime. These guys risk an off-year victory, writes Eric, in midterms that absolutely destroys them for 2028. But they may just lose 2026 too. Eric's right. I was on Fox, America's Newsroom this afternoon with John Roberts, and before I went on, they'd asked me to be up to speed on the Ken Martin speech. He is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and I got through it. It was painful. Here's my it with John Roberts from earlier today, cut number 1.
Hugh Hewitt, Fox News contributor and host of the Hugh Hewitt Show, joins us now. Uplifting way to kick off the meeting there, Hugh.
John, good to see you. I don't know that anyone got the memo about woke is not the way that the DNC wants to go. I did listen to Chairman Martin's speech before coming on today, and he used the term dictator-in-chief, referring to President Trump. He said, we're not going to bring a pencil to a knife fight. He also went on and said, we're not going to be the only party that plays by the rules. It's kind of a funny thing to watch. At the same time, I can't help but notice he looks like Dennis Kucinich 20 years ago. And I think his politics are like Dennis Kucinich's of 20 years ago. They've gone off the left cliff, beginning with a land acknowledgement. I had missed that. But I don't know if they understand that's another 80-20 issue. And they are really wedded to their 80-20 issues. And the elections in the midterm begin in 13 months, John. Voting starts in 13 months for the Congress that will take its seat in 2027. They got to get serious. They've only got $14 million on hand. The Republicans have $89 million on hand. And the single Democrat with energy, Gavin Newsom, very hard to see the rest of the country electing a California governor. But they've got problems.
You know, one of the other Democrats that's got a lot of momentum is Zoran Mamdani. But some of that momentum might have been blunted over the weekend as he was taking part in this festival in New York City, where he was encouraged to try to bench press 135 pounds. It didn't go quite as planned. Watch here.
And 1, 2, 3. Let's go! Yeah! Let's go! Hey! Up! Hey! Let's go! Hey, baby!
Yeah, we got it up a couple of times, but not without the help of what looked like a very strong spotter who seemed to be helping him with the weight. And you can't help but you went back to Dennis Kucinich 20 years ago. Well, I'll see you a Kucinich and raise you a Michael Dukakis. Remember this scene with Michael Dukakis? I was going to say. In the tank? But is this a Michael Dukakis moment for Mamdani?
I don't think so. That was a bad moment for the governor of Massachusetts and the Democratic nominee in 1988. But it taught everyone, don't put on funny hats, don't do stunts. And most people in the world of politics don't do funny hats and don't do stunts. Mr. Mamdani forgot that or never learned it. He's only been in office 4 or 5 years, and so maybe he thought he could do 135 pounds. They thought, it's the lowest weight on the bar, et cetera. Look, I'm not a gym rat. I'm not going to criticize him for that, but I do know optics, and optics don't include having to struggle with not exactly a Popeye-like display of strength. So I think Mr. Mamdani hurt himself, but you can't beat someone with no one. And right now, with Cuomo in the race and with Eric Adams in the race and with Curtis Sliwa in the race, unless they get down to one person, there's no way to beat him. And I don't even know if there's any way to beat him without it. Democrats, as we can see with the land acknowledgement in Minneapolis, are really wedded to going left and then further left and then off the left cliff. And I think it's going to take a couple of cycles till they get done with it.
Well, it gave Eric Adams a little bit of an opening because he took the same weight in the same place and pumped it about 5 times, only with the person spotting him, barely had his hands on the bar. And then he dubbed Mamdani Mom Scrawny. So we'll see if that nom de guerre sticks. Hugh, always great to catch up with you. Thanks so much, sir. Appreciate it.
I didn't know about Eric Adams coming up with something. Look, it's a universal rule of politics. Don't wear funny hats. Don't do stunts. And how do you beg off from that? You say something like, you know, I have just gotten done taking my relief factor, and I'm not sure I want to put the sprain I'm recovering from at risk. But you guys do it, and I'll cheer you on. And no one would think twice about it. But he could have used the Relief Factor out. And Relief Factor is a sponsor of the show. That's why I just put it up. Relief Factor is for gym rats, not Mr. Mamdani, obviously. I don't know, 135 pounds. I don't know what I could do. I don't know if I could do it or not myself. I am not a gym rat. I've never been into that, and it's not my thing. I like to trundle, and I go my miles, and I get my aerobic in, and I'm in pretty good shape, and the doctor agrees with me. But I credit Relief Factor and exercise, not weightlifting. My daughter keeps sending me, she's a propagandist for weightlifting, and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt does weights, and I'm just not, it's not the culture that I like. I don't like gyms. I like to be outside. But Relief Factors for you if you use the gym, or if you're like me and you like to be out trundling along or running or doing whatever it is, or if you like to row, whatever your game is, you ought to have a game. You ought to have something that you're exercising with, and Relief Factor ought to help you get through it. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4RELIEF, or visit their website and find the starter pack for $19.95. It's less than $1 a day. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com, and maybe we should send some to Mr. Mamdani. He's probably all spent after that big display of strength. ReliefFactor.com. Let me go back to J.D. Vance making the key point about they say their message is safety. J.D. got it there ahead of them. Vice President Vance, cut 13.
Like crime, why are Democratic governors doing everything in their power to make crime easier to do in their cities? It doesn't make an ounce of sense to me. But, Mr. President, I appreciate you being willing to help, and I hope these governors take you up on the offer, because we should clean up all of America's streets. It's the right of every American to live in safety and comfort in their community.
All right, so preempted. Democrats talking about safety as our message as opposed to tough on crime. You can actually do both. You can stress safety for the law-abiding and toughness for the criminal element. And you can say it again and again and again, and you can make yourself heard. The federal government has been enjoined by a district court from exporting to Uganda, deporting to Uganda, Abrego Garcia. That just came down. Breaking news always tops the show here at the Hugh Hewitt Show. But stay tuned. Vice President Vance was on Meet the Press yesterday. I want to give you a run-through of all that is ahead on that. Vice President Vance was on yesterday, Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. He talked about Russia, cut number 14.
I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict. They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith. We are trying to negotiate as much as we can with both the Russians and the Ukrainians to find a middle ground to stop the killing. I think what the president has tried to do here is try to engage in very aggressive, very energetic diplomacy, because this war is not in anyone's interest. It's not in Europe or the United States' interest. We don't think it's in Russia or Ukraine's interest to keep going. So we're going to keep on pushing for a diplomatic solution. And one final point about this, Kristen, if you look historically, whenever you have a complicated war with a lot of death and destruction, it kind of goes in fits and starts. There are hills and valleys to the negotiation. We sometimes feel like we've made great progress with the Russians, and sometimes, as the president has said, he's been very frustrated with the Russians. And we're going to keep on doing what we have to do to bring this thing to a close. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think that we're going to continue to make progress, but ultimately, whether the killing stops, that determination is going to belong to whether the Russians and the Ukrainians can actually find some middle ground here.
Cut number 15, the vice president continued to talk about the Ukrainian-Russian negotiations. 15.
I didn't say they conceded on everything, but what they have conceded is the recognition that Ukraine will have territorial integrity after the war. They've recognized that they're not going to be able to install a puppet regime in Kiev. That was, of course, a major demand at the beginning. And importantly, they've acknowledged that there is going to be some security guarantee to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Again, have they made every concession? Of course they haven't. Should they have started the war? Of course they haven't. But we're making progress, Kristen. And what I admire about the president in this moment is he's not asking 3.5 years ago. He's not trying to focus on every nitpicky detail of how this thing started 3.5 years ago. He's trying to focus on the nitpicky details of now, of what do the parties disagree on, what do they agree on, and how do you build a foundation from one side of that ledger to the other so you.
He continued to focus on Russia. Cut number 17.
Where exactly is the pressure on Russia to do anything if you're not right now imposing new sanctions? How do you get them to a place of getting to the table with Zelensky and stopping to drop bombs?
But, Kristen, I think that question betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of where we are. The president has applied aggressive economic leverage, for example, the secondary tariffs on India, to try to make it harder for the Russians to get rich from their oil economy. He's tried to make it clear that Russia can be reinvited into the world economy if they stop the killing, but they're going to continue to be isolated if they don't stop the killing. The president has applied more economic pressure to the Russians to stop this war than Biden did in 3 years. So the idea that we're not doing anything, we're already doing things right now, and this is how negotiation works. You do something, you talk to the parties, you try to see if there's a meeting of minds. Again, we believe we've already seen some significant concessions from both sides just in the last few weeks. We're going to eventually be successful, or we'll hit a brick wall. And if we hit a brick wall, then we're going to continue this process of negotiation, of applying leverage. This is the energetic diplomacy that's going to bring this war to a close.
One of the examples would be, of course, the sanctions on India for buying Russian crude and thereby financing the Russian war machine. Other people buy Russian crude, including next up, Turkey. Haven't said that yet, but that's who's next up. Cut number 18, more J.D. Vance on
the Ukrainians are going to
Russia.
Ultimately make the determination about where you draw the territorial lines in their own country. But, Kristen, this is how wars ultimately get settled. If you go back to World War II, if you go back to World War I, if you go back to every major conflict in human history, they all end with some kind of negotiation. We're actually not active parties in the negotiation. We're effectively mediating. We're trying to mediate the Ukrainians and the Russians to come to some agreement. If the Ukrainians are willing to say something on territory that brings the conflict to the close, we're not going to stop them. We're also not going to force them because it's not our country. We're trying to play a constructive role. The president is trying to play a constructive role to bring peace to the region, but he's not going to force these parties to walk through the door. All he can do is open the door and ask them to negotiate in good faith.
Well said. Cut number 20, by the way. Same theme.
Now, you said sanctions were not going to lead to a ceasefire. I think that's obviously correct. If you look at the way the Russians have conducted themselves, they don't want a ceasefire. They don't want a ceasefire for complicated reasons. We, of course, have pushed for a ceasefire. But again, we don't control what Russia does. If we did, the war would have been over 7 months ago. What we do believe, though, is that we continue to have a lot of cards. The President of the United States has a lot of cards left to play to apply pressure to try to bring this conflict to a close. And that's what we're going to do.
Cut number 19, last comment on Russia from Vice President Vance to Kristen Welker.
For Americans who are watching, can you guarantee no U.S. boots on the ground as a part of these security guarantees?
The president's very clear. There are not going to be boots on the ground in Ukraine, but we are going to continue to play an active role in trying to ensure that the Ukrainians have the security guarantees, the confidence they need to stop the war on their end, and the Russians feel like they can bring the war to a conclusion on their end. It's complicated, Kristen, but we're going to keep on trying to play these parties. We're going to keep on trying to convince these parties to talk to each other and continue to play the game of diplomacy, because that's the only way to get this thing wrapped up.
And they got around to the census. Now, I'm very, very glad that they did. We need the Department of Commerce and the Bureau of the Census to figure out soon what the census forms are going to ask and to begin to do it early so that it is done well. Since the 2020 census during COVID was such a disaster and such a mess, the vice president answered a couple of questions about the census. Cut number 22.
We had way fewer House seats than we should have. One, if the Democrats hadn't aggressively gerrymandered, and two, if illegal aliens weren't counted in the census for purposes of apportioning congressional seats. The best estimates I've seen is that in California, for example, has 5 additional congressional seats than it should have because they count illegal aliens for the purpose of apportioning representatives. Meanwhile, Ohio, my home state, lost a representative. We're literally losing representatives for American citizens in order to give congressional representation to illegal aliens. Republicans are trying to balance out the scales a little bit for basic fairness and for the integrity of our democracy, which the president cares about as much as anybody in the country.
Now, you do need to count illegals before you can make an argument that illegals ought not to count for purposes of apportionment. I don't believe that's correct. The Constitution speaks about apportioning House representation on the basis of people, not citizens, not illegal aliens, but people. And people are bodies. People are breathing bodies, not bodies in the ground. You don't go to Chicago and count twice. The vice president added cut number 23.
Of course, people who are here and who are not documented are not eligible to vote. But
They're not eligible to vote, but they do go in the congressional apportionment. That's why California has so many more seats, is because they count illegal aliens. So even though they don't vote, well, some of them actually do vote, but hopefully most of them don't, they end up getting congressional representation that ought by right go to American citizens.
He's absolutely right, and it stuns people, but that's the way it is. At least, though, we ought to know how many people in the country are here illegally. And if there is an effort to amend the Constitution to make it clear that apportionment ought to be on the basis of citizenship, we will have a good data set. But they have to begin the rulemaking on the census form, and I would urge them to begin the census in 2028 so that it is done by the beginning of 2030. Do you really think New York City is going to elect Mr. Mamdani? I think they are. Well, there are 4 candidates. I said to John Roberts earlier today on Fox America Reports that you can't beat something with nothing. And you can't beat one candidate with 3. And right now there are 4 candidates on the ballot. Mr. Mamdani, who is the Democratic nominee. Andrew Cuomo, disgraced governor of New York, scandal-plagued and beaten like a rug by Mamdani in the Democratic primary. Eric Adams, running as an independent. He is the incumbent mayor, former Democrat, incumbent mayor, running as an independent. And then on the Republican ticket, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis was a colleague for a number of years on the Salem Network. He had a show in New York. Nice guy. I don't think he can win in 1,000 years. So I think, especially after Eric Adams was on with Charlie Kirk last week, that our best bet is with Eric Adams to save New York City from itself. Because the left wing, look, I think Mr. Mamdani is actually a communist, a Marxist, not a Soviet Union-style communist, but a Marxist. I believe he is also anti-Semitic to the core. And I believe it will be an unsafe city, and his stuff about decommodifying housing is a disaster. He said this yesterday, cut number 32.
The Trump administration is one that we can see a model for how to fight it across this country. You can see that in Mayor Wu in Boston. We can also see it internationally with President Sheinbaum of Mexico, where it is through strength, it is through belief in the convictions that you hold in the very fabric of the city you represent, that you are able to fight back against an administration that is seemingly hell-bent on tearing apart this city, and doing so most especially through legislation that will throw millions of New Yorkers off their health insurance, cut SNAP benefits from the hungry, and will make it even more difficult to afford to live in the most expensive city in the United States of America.
I do not know what in the world he is talking about Claudia Sheinbaum. She is the president of Mexico, Sheinbaum, and she is a left-wing extremist, and there are many stories about her either inability, unwillingness, fear of, or partnership with the cartels. We do not need any lessons on how to run a failed state, which Mexico is quickly becoming. Meanwhile, another flash from the past came to the DNC today. Tim Walz, the one and only Tim Walz, governor of the great Gopher State, appeared at the DNC summer meeting in Minneapolis. We have to bleep this a little bit to make sure we comply with the FCC on our radio and network stations on television, cut number 34.
And I am proud of this state like so many others, and I will have to tell you, the privilege of my lifetime was stand beside someone we
Wait a minute. We don't know if it's bleeped. I just heard in my ear, we don't know if it's bleeped. I will, okay, it is bleeped. Let's play it again, cut number 34.
And I am proud of this state like so many others, and I will have to tell you, the privilege of my lifetime was stand beside someone we know was the most qualified and would have been a fantastic president in a President Harris. And look, We wouldn't wake up every day to on TV and a bunch of nonsense. We would wake up to an adult with compassion and dignity and vision and leadership doing the work, not a man-child crying about whatever's wrong with him. May his fat ankles find something today. Petty as hell.
Now, do you understand? Victor Davis Hanson talked on his weekend podcast about projection. May his fat ankles find something today. Petty as hell. Now, that is projection, right? An attack on, I don't know what he's talking about, his ankles, but whatever it is, it's petty as hell. And it's projection. VDH, it's a great weekend podcast. It's about an hour and a half, and it got me through the second half of my trundle this weekend. And I'm just very impressed with the first 30 minutes where Victor goes over the past 30 years in America, and especially the past 20 years in America, and what has happened, and how the Democratic Party has fallen into the classic error, not of a land war in Asia, not from The Princess Bride, but of projection. They take what they are doing and they project it onto other people. Petty as hell. After you attack someone's ankles, and of course, coarseness, they've embraced coarseness and vulgarity because they think that attracts the youngs. Good on them. Keep going with that, Governor Walt. It did not work. You'll manage to lose all seven swing states, as well as the popular vote. You got blown out. So I'm glad the DNC's in Minnesota, proving they learned nothing at all. I'm sorry, no Bethany Mandel today. Another casualty of the back-to-school week. I'll catch up with her later in the week. Gives me a chance, though, to tell you a very feel-good story. Tommy Fleetwood. Now, we have house guests, and they are golfers. I am no longer a watcher of every PGA event. I watch the majors, and I follow a few golfers, and someday I hope Mr. Kokrak wins a big one, because he and I were on the same golf team together, separated by 50 years. But Jason wasn't in the Tournament of Champions yesterday, the PGA Tour Championship, I should say. It was won by Tommy Fleetwood, who had 163 starts on the PGA Tour, and he had never won. How do you know? He's 34 years old, by the way. He's an Englishman. And Tommy Fleetwood won a tournament, one of the wealthiest tournaments, for you, $10 million first prize, $40 million purse. He was 0-163 until yesterday. He's come in second and third before. He's come in fourth and fifth. He's done very well. He's won more money. He's actually won more money than anybody else on the tour who's never won a tournament. That's what I think is extraordinary. When you've won, you know then that he's the best guy on the tour. If there was one person who better understood than anyone how absurd it would be if Tommy Fleetwood finally got over the hump by landing his first PGA Tour win of his career at the PGA Tournament Championship, it was none other than Tommy Fleetwood. No one needed to explain to him that the prospect of a golfer whose tour record is 0-163, winning a tournament with $40 million on the line, the most official prize money in the PGA Tour history, would count as a pretty good punchline. Quote, "There's so many unbelievable tournaments, I'm not going to be picky about which one I choose to have as the first one," Tommy said, "but I think it would be pretty funny if I won this week." By the time Fleetwood walked off the final green at Eastlake Golf Club in Atlanta on Sunday, it was no longer a joke. By finishing the Tour Championship at 18 under, 3 strokes ahead of Patrick Cantlay and Russell Henley, Fleetwood had ended a winless streak that was excruciating as it was impossible. Now, I watched this and I thought to myself, good on him, because the example that is of perseverance. And perseverance is a virtue. Perseverance, he said, proud, relieved, happy. There's a ton of emotion that I'll probably be feeling. Winning doesn't sink in for a while. He had a lot of golfers cheering for him, because a lot of golfers have come from behind to overtake Tommy Fleetwood in the 10 years that he's been on the tour and take a title away from him. And they all kind of feel bad, but of course you never don't win when you can. You don't throw it, you go for it. He's won on the European Tour, don't get me wrong, and he's won, I think, in Australia and a few other places, but He had $12 million more winnings than anyone else on the tour without a victory. That's a lot of money for a golfer. And he has made $33 million in his career. I remember what my friend Terry Pluto in Cleveland likes to say, the dean of Ohio sports writers, never feel bad for a multi-million-dollar athlete. They're playing a game. They're making a great living. It's excruciating to lose. We all lose in life. And the best athletes teach you, get up and win again. And he's lost a couple of tough ones before. At the Travelers Championship in June, the Wall Street Journal reports, he squandered a winning position by posting 2 bogeys on the final 3 holes, including a soul-crushing 3-putt on the final green that handed the victory to Keegan Bradley. That's the kind of golf I used to play. I no longer play it. The game is just too crushing for me. The Tour Championship looked like it might turn into another heartbreak, Journal report. After surging in the lead with 4 consecutive birdies early in the 3rd round, his tee shot on the par 3 15th sailed straight into the water. There was more water on the 15th. I don't know if any of you watch this. I'm never going to play golf again anyway. I like to caddy. I ride along with my friends. I'm very good with a rake. I can hold a pin. I know the rules of golf. I love golf. I think a golf course is a wonderful place to spend a few hours with friends, but I'm not playing anymore because I'm so bad. But that kind of thing, that water hazard, if any of you saw it, it's like Lake Erie. It was the biggest thing. Scotty Scheffler had hit into it too. And I was sitting there with my friend who was watching the tournament with him, and I said, I could never, ever. And it's a 175 yards. It's not a chip shot. I guess it is a chip shot for a pro, but it's 175 yards. And it's like that Target golf course down in Florida where everything's covered with water. But this was immense, like giant lake and a drop area. And Scheffler was out of it then. He was starting to make his move, and people would root for him. But if he couldn't win, good for Fleetwood. Goes to prove good guys win sometime. Persevere. Do not give up. Persevere. Now I want to go back to Donald Trump and the Oval Gaggle today, cut number 7.
You really want to be asked to go. You know, I hate to barge in on a city and then be treated horribly by corrupt politicians and bad politicians like a guy like Pritzker. He ought to spend more time in the gym, actually. This guy is a disaster. Gavin Newsom's a disaster. When we went, we saved Los Angeles. You wouldn't have been able to have the Olympics in Los Angeles. You're barely able to have it now. They did lose 25,000 houses to a fire that should have never occurred because they didn't let the water come down from the Pacific Northwest, which you guys don't want to write about. I had to break into the water supply to let the water down. And even now, we want more. We can have much more. It's less than half of what should be coming in. I don't know, they have a political thing about it. It's like the craziest thing I've ever seen. But I don't like going to a town, a city, place, a state, and then be criticized by some corrupt or incompetent governor where crime is rampant. Like, take a look at D.C. Crime was rampant. It was at the all-time worst. It got really bad during the Biden 4 years. And then I have a mayor stand up and say how crime has reached a 30-year low. 30-year low. People are being killed left and right. And it's not a 30-year low. Think of it. So for 11 days, there's been no murders.
Okay, then he got asked in the second press conference today whether he would send the Guard to red cities, cut number 28.
Mr. President, on the National Guard, you've talked a lot about Democratic-run cities and states. Yeah. Would you also consider sending the National Guard into red states and red cities that are also seeing high crime?
Sure, but there aren't that many of them. If you look at the top 25 cities that for crime, just about every one of those cities is run by Democrats.
He is right. There is no arguing with facts. You go to where the crime is, they are democratically run cities, and they were big into the defund the police movement during the summer of George Floyd. Coming right back, Stephen Miller sums it up for us today. Save the best for last. Assistant to the President, Stephen Miller, in the Oval Office today when the gaggle occurred about D.C. crime, cut number 36.
Because they've lost control of their place. Steve Miller, please say a few words.
Thank you, sir. So just to, first of all, follow up on what the Vice President said, No police officer working in the city can remember a time in their lives when there has been no murders. You can work at the police department for 20 years, 30 years, your whole life. We've checked the records. No one can even find a record of being murder-free for as long as we've been murder-free under President Trump's leadership. Additionally, and the president spoke about this before, we've uncovered, in the process of uncovering, a massive scandal in Washington, D.C. with the doctoring of crime stats. And the Department of Justice, under the Attorney General, is leading the effort to uncover this. But when we ultimately share the results, it will stun you. The extent to which, even though D.C. had the worst crime in America, honestly measured, it dramatically understated how bad it was. There's even accusations that murders and homicides were reported as accidents instead of murders. I mean, this is how severe the manipulation of the crime data has been in this city, and it will all be uncovered and it will all be brought to light. You know, I've had a chance to spend some time, as has everyone here, with the police officers in the city. Members of the public are going up to them and thanking them, just overflowing with gratitude, because for the first time in their lives, they can use the parks, they can walk on the streets. You have people who can walk freely at night without having to worry about being robbed or mugged. They're wearing their watches again. They're wearing jewelry again. They're carrying purses again. People had changed their whole lives in this city for fear of being murdered, mugged, and carjacked. It is a literal statement that President Trump has freed 700,000 people in this city who were living under the rule of criminals and thugs. And the last thing I'll say is that under the efforts of Terry, to my left and many here, what they found also is that the street criminals here in Washington, D.C. were doing business directly with the transnational criminal cartels, the foreign terrorist organizations. So not only was the city being run by these criminal thugs, but they were working with some of the most dangerous terrorist organizations on the planet to traffic weapons and drugs into this city. And what we are uncovering every day is shocking to us, and we look forward to sharing all the results with you. But President Trump, your leadership has
Well,
uncovered...
Secretary of Defense Pete Heggs has said this, cut 35.
Well, Mr. President, thank you very much for your leadership, and the Defense Department is proud to be a part of this task force. Just like we have been down at the southwest border, where crossings are at zero, we've got national defense areas where we're working with Border Patrol to secure the southern border for the American people. Just like Los Angeles, where ICE officers deserve to do their job without being attacked, we're really proud to be a part of defending the nation's capital and ensuring it is safe and beautiful and working with law enforcement. And Mr. President, let me tell you, the morale of the troops, getting out there talking to them, they love this mission. They're grateful to be doing it, whether they're D.C. National Guard or other state National Guards. And at your direction as well, sir, it's just common sense to make sure they're armed as well. And so they.
It is just common sense to have the National Guard where the police are overwhelmed and the political leadership is weak. Congratulations to everyone involved in that effort to make the nation's capital glorious again.